All right, folks. Let's get this show on the road. I apologize about all the different mess. You see, my office is still in absolute disarray. It's pretty normal for me. There we go. So, knives. I have this weirdly obsessive personality where I never quit a hobby. Just a sort of a weird thing that I do. Hi, Doug. And sometimes my different hobbies kind of go quiet for a little bit, and then they pick up again and all that. So as I was moving, I rediscovered my knife roll, and I remembered how much I enjoy messing with knives. And also, I have a knife on me far more than I have a gun, and I figured I should have a little bit of a conversation about knives. If time allows, there are other things I want to cover, a couple optics questions that I've been getting, and naturally with all the political situation, I think a small dose of sanity would probably be useful, and I might try to offer that. If I do not have time, I'll do another live cast sometime during the coming week. Anyhow, I apologize for whatever mess is making it into the picture. My office is not fully set up, but I'm making strides in the right direction. Hi, Gabriel. Fair warning, it's a good chance that my natural sarcasm is going to be a little bit worse than normal, if you can imagine that being possible. But I've been, I have some stomach issues, so I've been fasting the whole day today. So I'm basically hungry and mean. All I can drink is water. Fat people don't like to be hungry, so it might come through. Anyhow, so behind me, you see a bunch of knives. That's my knife roll that I discovered. I took some notes, and given that I mostly talk about guns and gun-related things and Second Amendment issues, the very first thing I want to mention is that in an environment that we live in, it is far easier to have a knife on you than a gun. And a knife you carry in many ways should be a tool first and a weapon second. And it is a nice thing about knives is that any half-decent knife is about as good of a weapon as a knife dedicated to things, right? Even beyond that, I'm assuming that refers to the state of my office. You don't see the fun parts. Among others, one of the things I'm doing is I'm setting up an optical test bench here so I can do some indoor rifle scope testing and stuff like this. So it is really in disarray, but hopefully in another week or two, I'll get it all worked out. Anyhow, so going back to knives. Because a knife is a tool, you will have it out a lot more than you have a gun. And one of the interesting trends I see a lot of people have knives on them that look like fighters. I don't think that's I don't think that is a great idea. And I'll give you an example. There are two reasons for it. One is that, God forbid, you ever have to do anything with this thing. If the knife you have on you was designed to stab things, good luck explaining that to the judge and a lawyer and a prosecutor. And two, most knives that are designed to be pure fighters are not great utility knives. And I have a knife on me all the time. And I use it to open boxes, cut apples, peel oranges, mild occasional cooking, cutting things in the garage, God knows what. I use it as a utility knife all the time. I was curious, so I took this knife. This is an old Masters of Defense, I think it's called the Razorback. Yeah. Designed by Masada Yub a long time ago. It had some criticisms, but it's a good personal defense weapon. If you're marginally skilled with a blade, it's a terrible utility knife. And if you have to, if we're talking about fixed blades, if you have to explain to some law enforcement what is this knife for, general purpose kind of hunting, skinning utility knife, versus what this knife is for. Okay, let me see. Let me hold them like this. Yeah, that way you can see them. This is much easier to explain than this. And it does not look like you are out looking for trouble, right? Anyhow, so, and to reiterate, if you're planning to stab somebody, any knife, if it doesn't have too much of a trailing point, is going to do just fine. With that out of the way, let's go through my notes. Folding knife versus fixed knife. Most of the knives you see here are folders. That's what I have in my knife roll. I brought out a couple of small fixed blades to show you. In most places in the country, well, not most populous places in the country, carrying a fixed blade this size on you is a felony. However, carrying a folding knife this size is perfectly okay. California, for example. In California, a knife that's, I think, 2 inches or longer is a felony. Folding knife any size is fine. Now, if you have a freaking folding machete on you, it might not still look all that good, but at least you are staying legal. Aside from the legal issues, it's just much easier to carry a folding knife on you. Many modern folding knives have nice pocket clips. You put it in your pocket. It's reasonably concealed. It's legal in most places, and you're good to go. The big advantage of a fixed blade knife is that it is basically stronger. You know, if it's a well-made knife, it's one hunk of steel with a couple of handle scales. It's difficult to break, but it's distinctly less comfortable to carry and illegal in many places. I do usually have one in my car. I can talk later about the blades in the car, but I would not necessarily advise carrying it on you unless there are specific exemptions. One obvious one is that if you have issues with your hands that don't allow you to operate a folding knife easily, okay. If where you live it's legal, a fixed blade is a good thing. Another, if you are doing a lot of things with a knife where, you know, kind of dirty, where blood, grit, whatever can get into the knife, just fixed blade knives are much easier to clean. It doesn't have a pivot where all the crap can get into. But regardless of which you choose, I would strongly recommend choose something that does not look too intimidating. And most of it comes down to size and to a blade shape, right? If I'm, let's say, in the post office and I'm trying to open a box and I reach into my pocket, whip out this thing, is this more intimidating than this thing? Yeah, I think this is probably going to be less likely to give me a bunch of dirty looks, or some overzealous citizen calling the cops. I've actually had some crazy woman once yell and just about faint and call 911 when I pulled out an actually fairly small but kind of evil-looking folding knife in a public place trying to open something. It was interesting. The police officer told her she was insane, but could have gone either way. Thankfully, most peaceful-looking knives are just as good at stabbing people, but they're much better for opening boxes and doing general utility things. They also usually have a stronger tip. There is a knife I wanted to show you here. So you guys tell me, what is a better utility knife? This is what I usually carry on me. I'll talk about it. This funky looking thing, beefed up point, nice long belly, good slicer. Or this. I'll put them up side by side. Hey, Brian. If I need to stab somebody, I cut them up. There's no difference between them. If I want to scare somebody, this looks evil. You know what all this also is? It is also a very fragile point. For any sort of utility use, there is a really good chance you're going to break this thing. How do I know that knife tips can be broken? Did not start out this way. Okay, I don't know if you can see. I'll get it closer to the camera. Okay. So the point of the matter, treat a knife as a tool. Carry a knife that's not going to scare people. In practical terms, that means that a blade in a 3 to 3 1/4 inch range is probably your best bet. Okay. I've got a question, half in Russian, half in English. I can address this later in more detail. I don't particularly, you're talking about the XTR2. I don't like that scope very much. Let me do my speech on knives and I can go through the questions and I'll answer them, all right? Where was I? Yeah, okay. Since we're on blades, let's talk about blade shapes. Some of the knives look distinctly funky. This is the Spydiechef by Spyderco. And it looked weird, but it turned out to be freakishly comfortable. But the reason why I carry this knife most of the time, at least when I'm at home, is this weird blade shape. It's all belly. Most of the things you will do with a small knife involve slicing of some sort. And you want a knife that has a reasonable amount of belly. I remember when I first started collecting knives, one of the first good knives that I bought was this, because everybody said that a Tanto blade is the best, reinforced tip, etc. Yeah, but for general purpose use, this is one of the worst blade shapes you can find. This is a, what's it called? No, the Elishevitz by Benchmade. I was curious about how it is to stab things with different blade shapes, so I got a huge chunk of meat and proceeded to experiment with stabbing it with a bunch of different knives that I have. No difference. But for day-to-day use, this is much better than this. Okay. And so Mr. Slav Guns has chimed into my live show without noticing that the title says General Q&A. And talking about EDC knives. But thank you for paying attention. Nobody wants to get into, it's a good question, Brad. So nobody wants to get into a knife fight. In a knife fight, everybody gets cut. And it's a pretty gnarly thing. But I use knives in my day-to-day life all the time. And I've spent the majority of my adult life in a place where you can't carry a gun. And I'm not law enforcement officer. Law enforcement officers are exempt from a lot of these limitations. While personally I avoid any fight of any sort like the plague, if I have to be in one, I would much rather have a knife than not have a knife. And a weapon almost of any sort changes. I'm a lifetime martial artist and a decent kickboxer and a few other things. A blade changes everything. Another really important thing is that, what's a nice way of saying this? So I'm sort of an aging martial artist, right? But I'm a big guy. I've now gotten fat. I'm close to 300 pounds, but I still train. I hit things. And I'm good at it. I've been doing martial arts for 35 years, I think, right? A moderately athletic person who hasn't done a martial art in his life, if he practices, let's say, Kali with a knife for a year and a half, has probably a better, and if he's reasonably athletic, has probably a better than 50-50 chance against me unarmed. And I've been doing this all my life. That's why knives. Okay. Bingo. Knives are scary in trained hands, but what people do not realize is that knives are scary even in mildly trained hands. Okay. Knives are even scary in untrained but reasonably quick and confident hands, right? And the big difference between a knife and almost any other tool is that if you cook, you're comfortable with a knife. It's an extension of your hand. If you just have one in a pocket and use it on a day-to-day basis to open things, you're comfortable with a knife. You know where the point is. The transition from that into basic ability to defend yourself is comparatively simple from a physical standpoint. It is difficult from a psychological standpoint. Bringing yourself up to the point where you're willing and able to cut another human being is not so simple. Okay. Right? Not something to do easily, not something to take for granted. But there have been a ton of experiments where at a reasonably close distance, a reasonably skilled guy with a knife can cut you up before you can draw a gun. And aiming with a knife is a much easier thing. Okay. You're absolutely correct, Scott. It is just another tool in a toolbox. Okay. Anyhow, so a couple other things. I want to show you a couple of different blade shapes and how they differ from each other. So we've got my carry knife, the Spydiechef. It's called the chef for cooking. They actually cook dinner with this thing. There's an experiment that works really, really well. Let's see. Geometric tanto, American perversion of what Japanese tanto used to be. Let's see. This is what is this? Spear point blade. Okay. Standard mild drop point. Okay. I'm gonna try to hold all three up in my hand at the same time so that you can see them in front of the camera. Three of these are perfectly useful utility knives. Which three? These three. Yeah, is one better for certain things than the other? Yeah. To me, this is probably the most practical of them. But all three, and I'll talk about the other two are much cheaper knives in a moment. People spend a lot of time agonizing over blade shape, where in the grand scheme of things, there are only a couple that are not terribly useful. One being the geometric tanto, the tanto blade that has a sharp point, like this one. And I don't think I have any here. Something called a Warncliffe blade or sheep's foot blade. They have their advantage for specific situations. But aside from that, they're fairly useless. No, I don't have a Warncliffe. This is not a Warncliffe, it's a funky blade. This is a sheep's foot, like this. Aside from being very small, it's a straight edge, so it's easy to sharpen. Doesn't have any belly, so it doesn't slice. This is not sharpened, so you can't stab anyone. Don't use this. Okay. What people do not pay enough attention to, and if they do, oh, there we go. I have kind of a sheep's foot modified Wharncliffe. It's a tiny knife. Looks pretty, looks cute, does not look threatening, not terribly useful. Don't get a knife you can't stab somebody with. And if you stab somebody with, don't mention that I said it. Try not to stab anyone. What does not get a ton of traction is the blade thickness and blade width. I will give you an example. Is this a very useful utility blade? Anyone? No? No, basically, right? There is a, if you're actually trying to cut something, try to go take your favorite folder, try to go cook dinner with it, cut an apple, whatever else. You'll find several interesting things. One of them is that you want a blade that is fairly thin. Okay. What happens is that if the wedge is too wide, it becomes not terribly practical. It's one of the things that happens with a lot of tactical blades. They try to make them super strong, super heavy duty. A knife is not a pry bar. Now, if you're a first responder and you may have to stab through some sheet metal or something or do other things, yeah, there is definitely a place for ultra overbuilt folding knives like that from Medford or Tops, or the name will come back to me. There's a bunch of companies that make these things, and they're super, super tough. For general purpose use, it's not your best option. I specifically look for blades that are fairly thin, or where the blade is fairly wide. Then even if you have a fairly thick spine, the way it tapers, you still have a reasonably thin blade profile. It'll work for, how interesting. So Doug is saying that's hard to see the actual knives. Let's do this. I'll take some pictures of them. I think YouTube might be throttling the resolution. And let's do this. I'm gonna take some pictures of the knives and I'll put them up later if they're actually hard to see. After the live thing is done, I'll take a look at the video and I'll see what the quality is. Okay. Okay. Another very good blade shape, as Shrikos just mentioned, is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. Looks familiar? Okay. Let's see if I get close to this. There you go. Useful knife shape. Useful knife shape. Useful knife shape. These two are useful and inexpensive. Extremely useful knife shape. Oh, the camera is looking for my face. Let's see. There you go. Extremely useful knife shape. Kind of expensive, though. I'll talk about specific knives a little bit later. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the tip. I didn't think the focus would adjust properly, but this works better. Okay. Where was I? Yeah. If we're talking about the blade thickness and the blade shape, if you look at a typical folder, this is a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 that I just got. I'll talk about where I got it and why I got it in a moment. What are the weakest points in a folding knife, in a properly built folding knife, there are two generally weak points. One is the same weak point as any knife has. That's the tip, right? And a tip is a compromise, right? To be able to do delicate things, wood carving, that kind of stuff, you need a fine tip. If you're going to pry, you need a really overbuilt tip. But if it's really overbuilt, it's not going to be good for delicate tasks. And that's the case for all knives, fixed blades or folders. What is the other weak point of a folding knife? Well, it is the pivoting mechanism. This is where it is the weakest, okay? So if you make the blade super thick, this is still going to be the weakest. If you make the blade a reasonable thickness, like this knife, this is still going to be the thickest, right? So depending on what you're looking to do with this thing, choose a blade that will work best for utility tasks. That's usually something that's not overly thick. A good test, go find an apple. And if you're able to cut through an apple with your knife, where you're actually cutting rather than wedging into it so the apple splits, you have reasonable blade geometry and it'll work well for you. Is that the case for all tasks? No. If you're a hunter and your primary use is to skin animals, you don't need to go very deep right there. So this is a skinner. It's a custom knife, dowel-made knife, 154 cm. Let's see if I can get it close enough. Okay, I don't know how well you can see it. It has fairly comparatively thick tang, right? It's extremely hollow ground. Like this. Yeah, there you go. It's a mirror finish and it's hollow ground. What does it mean? It's super thin right behind the edge and it thickens toward the spine. But if you're skinning, you never quite get that deep into the, okay. Where was I? All right, so we talked a bit about blade shape and blade thickness. Don't get carried away with super tough looking, super thick knives, unless you will actually be prying things with it. Different ballgame, special application. Another thing I run into all the time is interesting differences in opening mechanisms. Okay, the headphones annoy me a little bit. I don't have anybody else on the livecast. So if you guys don't hear me, please say something in the comments. Okay, but anyhow, opening mechanisms. There are automatic knives, there are assisted knives, there are flippers, there are thumb studs, and Spidey hole, right? I was once curious, and I started looking into local knife laws. And to my great surprise, I found that they vary substantially from place to place. One of the things that surprised the hell out of me was how restrictive some places are with assisted knives. Okay. California was, for example, mostly okay with it, but there were a bunch of police officers who thought that these were full automatic knives, and people have gotten in trouble with them. This is one of the first assisted knives. I do not carry this one. I can't quite figure out if it's legal for me to do so where I live now, because state and local laws can vary substantially. And on top of it, I travel a fair bit. And because I travel, that means if I want to have anything that's even mildly suspicious, I have to research local laws of every place I go to, right? And the laws can pertain to how the knife is opened. The laws can pertain to the blade length. For example, there are some places where anything over 3.5 inches is kind of a gray area, and over 4 inches can be illegal. Go figure. There are places that look down on assisted opening knives, right? And you can be inside the city or outside the city on two opposite sides of the street. The laws can be different. So I don't want to mess with all this stuff, and I travel a fair bit. So I err on the side of caution. I do not carry any automatic or assisted opening blades. If you live in one place and you don't travel very much and you know your local laws, carry whatever works for you. What I found more interesting was that from a utility and from self-defense standpoint, you may want to find a knife that is fairly easy to open with either hand. This is ultimately where assisted blades really shine, because you kind of nudge the blade and it just flips out. With not assisted blades, it can get a little interesting. For example, my favorite knife that I carry around here is a frame lock that has this Spyderco hole. So opening it with the right hand is very easy. Opening it with the left hand gets a lot more interesting, because on this side, the locking bars partially obscures the opening hole, right? It's pretty much the only flaw I found with this knife. Like, it's opening it with the left hand, it's possible, but it takes work. What will work best for you will be pretty individual. When I first thought of this and I decided I'm going to practice carrying the knife on my weak side and opening it up with my weak hand, I realized how, and I'm not ambidextrous. I'm close to being ambidextrous, but I'm a little bit more right-handed. So I used to find things mostly with the right hand. Until I started practicing with this, I could not have imagined how different it is. And I found, for example, that though I don't like the blade shape, this knife, it has a little, let's see how well you can see it. You see this little disc in the back, and it's fully ambidextrous. Opening this sucker with the left hand turned out to be much easier than most other things. Yeah, go figure. One of the more recent trends with knives is knives like this guy. Do you see a thumb stud here? Let's see, where is it? Yeah, there you go. No thumb stud, nothing. All it has is a silly flipper. Why is it silly? Well, a flipper depends on a nice hinge. Usually they have either like bronze washers or ball bearings. Don't know what this guy has, so that you can flip it, right? I can't flip this thing with my left hand for the life of me. Doesn't quite work, right? Now it worked. However, I cannot deploy this knife in any sort of a slow and controlled manner that does not get people at the post office to run screaming for the doors. If you only use it in a place, in a very permissive environment, doesn't matter. If the flipper works better for you with both hands, use that. If you are in potentially non-permissive environments, yep, I've seen people use fully automatic knife turn. Jared, yeah, I originally got into knives because I was interested in metallurgy, different steels. So I'll talk about that a little later in more of an extent. Where was I? Yeah. How you open a knife weirdly makes a big difference. And I basically have completely pulled out assisted knives and like that. The rotation, I pulled out all the flippers out of rotation. Another thing that I found out in the hard way is because this little nub sticks out in the back, depending on how the knife is built on the inside. Because I have other things in my pocket, I can accidentally open this in my pocket, which I did not enjoy. Stab me in the thigh. And another thing that I found is that when you carry a knife a lot in your pocket, all the lint, debris, all sorts of other crap can get into the hinge. And then this smooth flipping action becomes no longer smooth, and then it's really hard to do with either hand. So basically, I don't use that anymore. Okay. What else? Different locks. I don't use slip joint knives. I don't use anything that can close back on my fingers anymore. I don't think you can see it well, but I have the scars to prove it. Every folding knife I have locks in some way, shape, or form. If you want to have some entertainment, go to a knife forum of some sort and start a post that's claiming that the a locking mechanism of your choice is the by far superior solution. And you will be lynched in about 28 seconds. This is like one of those Ford versus Chevy debates, 308 versus 3006, that kind of stuff. I think I've tried pretty much every blade lock known to man at this stage. And when properly executed, they all work well. And when badly executed, they all suck. That's pretty much it. Okay. Joel, yes, absolutely. So the way I usually do this is I'm gonna go through my pre-prepared speech, sort of, and then I'll open it up to a Q&A, and I'll go through all the comments, and I'll answer all the questions that are already in the comments, and we'll see where that goes next. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, knife locks. Use a knife lock that works best for you. I have high quality lockbacks, liner locks, access lock, compression lock, you name it. They all work if you know how to use it and if they are done well. This is not what I would really be basing my decision on. Another argument that I see a fair bit: what should you have with you, a multi-tool or a proper knife? I usually have a pocket knife on me, and I have a multi-tool in my car. The only reason for that is that I collect knives, and I like using different knives, and multi-tools are for me a little different, a little bit thicker. Sometimes I do have a multi-tool in my pocket. Whatever I have in my pocket, my only real requirement has to be that the blade, the primary blade, has to lock, and that I can open that blade with one hand. I really need one-handed opening, and I strongly prefer one-handed closing, although that's less of a requirement. But I have to be able to deploy the knife or multi-tool, whatever it is, from my pocket with one hand and open the blade comparatively quickly. And there are multi-tools that will do that for you, among other things. I have a couple. I can do another episode on multi-tools if you guys are interested. I have a whole box of them somewhere. But ultimately, one-handed opening and locking blade is pretty much my minimal requirements. Okay. Now, another thing that will get you in all sorts of interesting discussion is blade steels. And Jared has asked that question. Yes, I have favorite knife steels, and most of them I don't necessarily recommend for the faint of heart. As I mentioned earlier, I got into knives to a significant degree because I liked different knife steels. And one of the things I learned very quickly is that the knife that holds the edge the longest and the best is usually, although there are exceptions, is usually also the steel that will be the hardest to sharpen. Okay. For example, my Paramilitary 2, which is a fairly new addition to my collection, it is made out of a steel called Maxamet. All right. Let me see if I can put that on the screen. This is the knife that actually is in my pocket right now. It is a wonderful design, probably one of the best by Spyderco, and I like Spyderco knives, so that's saying something. That's what this guy is. This blade, I think, is hardened to 67 on a Rockwell scale. You can only sharpen it with a diamond stones, and you really need to know what you're doing. If you're experienced in sharpening knives, or you have access to a shop that can sharpen knives for you, yeah, by all means, get the steel that holds the longest edge, that's toughest, etc. And go for it. For smaller blades where the steel doesn't have to be quite as tough, a Maxamet, although it's not stainless, it's resistant though, is a good choice. And on this guy, this is also a Spyderco Native 5. The steel is called S110V. Okay, both wonderful knives. And what I'm doing right now, these are two of the probably longest edge holding comparatively commonly available steels that I know, and I'm doing experiment to see which one holds an edge better. I experiment with everything. And let's see. That is the one you just saw. That was the second knife, right? Both of the steels are a bitch. Absolutely a bitch to sharpen. With the Paramilitary, with this guy, I kind of cheated. So I got it from a knife store in Omaha, in Nebraska, called Omaha Knives. I do not have any on OmahaKnife.com. I'm gonna share the screen with you guys so you know which shop I'm talking about. This guy, OmahaKnife.com. They're working on a new website. The website is not as pretty as it could be, but I'm sort of somewhat friendly with the owner, and couldn't recommend them more if I tried, for a couple of reasons. One, the owner is a good dude. Oh yeah, general disclaimer, no affiliate. I do not have any sort of an affiliate agreement with them. I have no financial involvement with his shop. Nothing of the sort. I simply think that the owner is a pretty good dude, and he knows a lot about knives, and they take care of their customers. So this Paramilitary 2 in Maxamet came from Omaha Knife. And one of the things that these guys do, they offer knife sharpening service. I don't like the factory edge on most knives, so rather than spend a lot of time trying to get this thing right, I cheated. I asked him before they sent it to me to go and go to town on it, and they did. And it came to me not just razor sharp. We'll take this a step further. It came to me stupid sharp. I have a lot of practice sharpening knives. I cook, I have fancy chef knives, I have Japanese water stones, diamond stones, belt sharpeners, all sorts of stuff. I am not convinced. Oh yeah, and I've been sharpening knives for 20-some years. I am not at all convinced I can make this knife or any knife as sharp as he sent me this one. So that was pretty impressive. If you guys are looking for a knife, I'll put the link in the comments. Consider Omaha Knife. It's not as well known as some of the larger internet stores, but like I said, it's a little bit of personal attention is a good thing, and the guy's a good dude, and he has good prices. He doesn't sell the very cheap knives. I'll talk a little bit in a moment about budget knives that have gotten a lot better in recent years. But anything mid-range and up, he has a lot of experience with them, and he's a hunter. So he has a lot of empirical experience with how long different blades last for skinning animals. And that's not a bad way to see what really works and what doesn't. So we talk about blades a lot, but how well a particular knife works, how long it holds its edge, how easy it is to bring back. The edge is a combination of type of steel, shape of the knife, heat treat. Heat treat is really, really critical. And overall blade geometry, how thick it is behind the edge and all that sort of stuff. Curtis, that's the guy at Omaha Knife, has got a ton of mileage and a lot of knowledge in that area. So ask him. And if you're looking for a knife, talk to them. Once again, I don't get anything out of this. I just happen to like the guy. Okay. All right. Going back to the comments. Okay, so I got some optics questions. I will address them a little bit later. Okay. So what's good? The first and obvious questions with steels, knife steels, blade materials, is how good you are in taking care of your knife. In principle, with most cases, you will get a better combination of edge holding with toughness with a steel that's not very stainless. However, there's a high risk of that knife rusting, and with a folding knife, there is a high risk of moisture or some corrosive materials getting into the hinge and really wreaking some havoc there that you can't easily see unless you're planning to completely disassemble your knife on a regular basis, which is something I don't like doing. So if I were to pick one general purpose knife steel that I think is the best for lazy people, it would actually be the steel in this Spydiechef. The steel is called LC200N. It's one of the family of nitrogen steels, excuse me, that have been slowly making their way into the knife world. Spyderco has probably been ahead of the curve there. And it basically doesn't rust, doesn't corrode at all. It's one of the reasons why I use this knife is that it has titanium scales, LC200N blade, other than some screws, maybe, even then I'm not so sure. But other than the screws, and yeah, they're coated with something, there's nothing here that can rust. I generally take care of my blades. And if I have a non-stainless blade on me, I will wash it, take care of it, etc. But with this knife and this steel, it's called LC200N. And the specific knife in question is Spyderco Spydiechef. This guy. The specific problem with this knife is that it is expensive. It usually runs in the $130 to $140 range. I have two of them because I'm crazy enough, but honestly, I don't get discounts on knives, so this is not something I recommend to people unless you're really into knives or have enough disposable income. Spyderco has released, I think, a couple of different knife models in this steel that are a little bit less expensive. So so this is one, and I think there are a couple of others. Let me show you this. I haven't tried this knife before, but I'm thinking about it. This guy. Okay, Spyderco Siren. Still expensive, but it's much cheaper than the Spydiechef, right? But this LC200N steel is the real deal. In terms of overall performance, it is, to me, it seems to hold its edge pretty close to S30V, which has become kind of a very standard high-end blade steel. Probably similar toughness. The edge doesn't seem to roll too much, but it does not corrode. It just doesn't freaking corrode. So this is the most low-maintenance blade steel I've ever seen. I've even considered making some other knives in it, but here's the catch, right? So for fixed blade knives that don't have the hinge, I don't care that much, right? And a lot of the fixed blade knives I have are not made out of stainless steels because I don't really have any problem taking care of them, and I don't go over salt water very much. If you're near salt water, you should really be worried. I mean, I live in a comparatively dry place, but I'm around the kitchen a lot since my wife doesn't like cooking and I do. So that matters to me. Outside of that, if you are comfortable with a non-stainless blade, there are a lot of good options. For larger blades, I kind of like tougher steels. This one is CPM M4. It's a non-stainless, high-speed tool steel. Holds its edge for a very long time. It seems fairly tough. Haven't broken the tip yet, and I've done some fairly nasty things with this knife. Okay. Yeah, so M4. That was this Spyderco Paramilitary that I just showed you. If I were on a budget, the best budget steel right now is D2. D2 is kind of an interesting steel. It's been around for a long time. I was curious. I have a ton of knives in D2. Back when I first started getting into knives, D2 was considered to be high-end steel. Now there's a ton of folders that are $50 or less that have reasonably well heat-treated D2 steel. I have a couple here. I'll talk about them momentarily. So I was curious about D2. The original patent was from 1920s, I think. There are a few different versions. I think there's even a powder version of it. Powder metallurgy is a different way of making steel, but it makes a fairly expensive steel. Of the commonly available steels, your best combination of edge holding and toughness is probably D2. And because the steel has been around for so long and it can be made by fairly conventional methods, it's doesn't need to be expensive, and heat treating this steel is reasonably well explored, so that even inexpensive D2 knives seem to have perfectly decent heat treat. I remember in the 20 years ago, when I first looked at this, was considered to be high-end steel and all that, and everybody said it didn't take a good edge and it was brittle and all that sort of stuff. And then people like Bob Dozier and a few others just started making razor-sharp knives in D2 that held the edge for a long time. Turned out to be the heat treat, I think. But there's a bunch of inexpensive D2 knives now. This is SEESEE. I'll put the names in the description. A Vispa, kind of a frame lock knife. I think it's less than $50. Same company, smaller knife. This is easily one of my favorites. Inexpensive knives. I think SE Zancudo. Let's see if I can get you guys to see this. Maybe. There we go. Okay. Let's see. So the knives that I happen to like that are inexpensive, these are both made in Taiwan. They were designed by guys who do adventure training out in South America somewhere. Randall Adventure Training. They designed a couple of knives. SE, I think, is their company, or at least they're consulting for them. And they also designed a couple of knives for Ontario that are called Rat Model 1 and Rat Model 2. Rat standing for Randall Adventure Training. This is the Model 2. It also happens to be in D2. See if I can get this close enough to the camera for you guys to see. Okay. I think $35. These are not as nice as my high-end knives, right? So if you're going to try to compare this $30, $40 D2 bladed knife to the 200-something Paramilitary and Maxamet, it's not close. However, I've run into an interesting phenomenon. I've learned as I get older, I lose shit. I learned that as I get older and go to the airport, I tend to forget that I have a knife in my pocket. I really don't like donating $200, $300 knives to the TSA. So I started looking, and I found a bunch of these fairly inexpensive ones. They have D2 steel. They have reasonable lockup. I don't expect any of these to last me a lifetime. But for the price of one $250 Spydiechef, I can buy 6 $40 D2 knives and stuff them in different pockets and cars and everything and be totally okay. All right. Anyhow, I think I'm going to stop boring you guys with knife stuff. If you have further questions, that's most of what I wanted to cover. And I'll go through some comments and answer some existing questions, and we'll go from there. Okay. All right, going back to the beginning. Okay, Sykes Fairbairn apple peeler. Yeah. Good luck with that. For those who don't know, it's a kind of this leaf style double-sided Sykes Fairbairn dagger. Kind of an interesting thing. Okay, this is an optics question. So the burris that Milos is asking about is the XTR2 8-40 by 50. Mechanically, it's very robust. Optically, I don't like that scope very much. So with the XTR2, I really like the 2-10, which they discontinued, and the 4-20. 3-15 and 5-25, I thought were not quite as impressive, but the 4-20 is very good. 8-40, I think, is not great. The optical quality of that product line, it's an aging product line. They're exceedingly robust, but the optical quality is not quite enough to sustain 40x magnification. If you're looking for very high magnification on a budget, the question comes down to whether you need front focal plane or second focal plane. If you're okay with the second focal plane, your best bet for a lot of magnification for the money is Citroen S3. But anyhow, if you're still here paying attention, tell me a little bit more what you're looking to do with the scope. I may be able to make a recommendation. All right, Mr. Slavgans was trying to be funny. I think he went to eat dinner at this point. I use scope boxes to test edge retention of knives because cutting paper and cardboard is kind of hard on knives. That is probably the best general purpose use for a scope box. I don't like unboxing videos. And if you first take the scope out and you're planning to stab the scope box, use the Tanto. Okay. Let's see. All right, Mr. Slavgans did Shindaru kickboxing for 8 years. Yeah, maybe I should kick his ass when we finally meet face to face. Just joking. I like Max. He's a good friend, so we joke all the time. Okay, there's a good question. So the bus knives and their infi steel. Yeah, I've played with them a bit. They're really well made fixed blade knives. They claim that the steel is super proprietary and all that. To the best of my knowledge, it's a comparatively simple carbon steel, but they have extremely good heat treat and a very consistent heat treat. They have a great reputation because they were among the first to make this really tough, high quality, well heat treated, good blade geometry knives. Would I personally buy one today? Probably not, because when they started, there weren't all that many options. Now it's different. I think they're a little bit overpriced for what they are, but there's nothing wrong with them either. They have a great reputation for a reason. They've been around for a long time. They're good knives. There's nothing really wrong with them. But if I'm spending a lot of money on a knife, I'm probably going to go full custom, right? If I want a big ass buoy, it's in a safe. Let me see if I can pull a knife out for you guys. This, let's see. Okay, so if I'm going full custom, if I'm spending a lot of money, I'll do something like this. This is a knife by custom maker named Big Chris. It is really expensive. It is really spectacular. It is better than any production fixed blade knife I've ever seen. It is perfectly balanced. I don't know how he does it. Distally tapered. The handle is perfect. It's perfect. If I'm spending a lot of money, I'm gonna go full custom. Probably not gonna go with bus knives, but there's nothing really wrong with them. Okay, that is absolutely correct. The heat treat is a big deal. Probably a best example of that is a knife steel called S30V. It was touted originally as the first knife steel that was specifically designed for knives. I don't have any inside knowledge. I don't know if it was or not, but it is a good knife still. And when it first came out, they made a bunch of knives in it, and they tried to figure out what hardness to heat treat it, how to heat treat it, and all that sort of stuff. But heat treat varied all over the place, right? I have 3 knives with S30V that were from a comparatively early vintage, 2 by a company called Lone Wolf, and 1 by Spyderco that I like so much. And in terms of edge retention, for what I paid for them and for how well the knife does now, all 3 suck. I still use them, you know. They're okay, they're not useless. But modern day D2 steel, for example, on this SE Zancudo, one of these $35 knives that I talked about, this holds its edge longer than early S30V, okay? Simply because of heat treatment. Now S30V, modern day S30V steel is a far cry. They took them a few years. They finally figured out how to do it consistently. Modern S30V knives are very good. These 3 early ones I have, they perform a little better than 440C, worse than well heat treated 154 cm. It's not great. All right, we talked about blade steels. I have some questions about scopes. Okay, so Joel, I'm sorry it took me this long to get to you, buddy. I'm gonna close some knives and put them away. You're having issues with striker 4.5 to 30. Almost dark. It's not supposed to be dark. It's very slightly warm, but it's a lot of scopes are like this. So when the color contrast is very slightly warm, for a lot of people, it slightly enhances contrast. But the strikers I have, the color contrast is fairly neutral, maybe very, very slightly warm. If yours is very warm, they may be a problem. Okay, so there are 2 possibilities. One is that you did not go through exercise of getting your eyepiece set up correctly for your eye. That's absolutely critical. If the eyepiece is not correctly set up, the parallax is going to do all sorts of wonky things, right? So before you talk to the company or to the guy who you bought the scope from, assuming you haven't, if you have, please let me know. Assuming you haven't, go through the exercise and focus the eyepiece. I have a couple of videos in my list on how to focus the eyepiece on front focal plate scopes. It takes a little time, but it is worth it. Go through the eyepiece focus again and see if that gets it better. It should not fix the color temperature. If it's warm now, it should still be warm. But I wonder if there are focus issues, your eyes are playing tricks with you. It is possible. So go through the eyepiece focus and then try this again. And if it doesn't work, you may have to talk to Delta. I have a couple of them. I've seen a few more. They're generally consistent scopes. If it's not focusing at 1,000 yards, either it's something that fell through the cracks of quality control or your eyepiece is not set up correctly. Okay. Thank you, Joel. I really do appreciate it. You know, Bark River is good. Falkneven is good. Kind of depends. Kind of depends on what you like, right? So the 2 fixed blade knives I have here are both customs. This one is a dowel knife, and this one was, I think, Gin Ingram. This is actually G2. I've had this for a long time, and I really like this thing. It so happens that most of my folders are now production. I sold all my customs, and a lot of my fixed blade knives are still custom. Most reasonable blades going to be good. I don't look at it so much by the maker, although I like Bark River. They make good stuff. I look at it from a standpoint of edge profile. With smallish fixed blade knives, I also don't like them to be overly thick. And I like different steels. And what I've basically converged on, sort of, if I were to buy another small fixed blade knife, given that I have a few already, right, I would go for the 4V steel, CPM 4V. I have a, excuse me. So Spyderco ran this program called Mule Team. They took the same blade shape, which is a small fixed blade knife, and I happen to like this blade shape. And they just made them without scales, without sheaths, in a ton of different steels. And I have a couple of them, and I happen to have one in 4V. This thing is awesome. If I were to do another small fixed blade, it would be 4V. It's not stainless, it is stain resistant, it's super tough, it holds an excellent edge. Once we start getting to bigger knives, I want a CPM 3V. And who makes it is less critical, because the marketplace right now is so competitive that most people who make them and stay in business generally do a pretty good job, right? For example, this Bowie knife that I showed you guys from Big Chris, that's a 3V knife, right? Holds its edge forever, stupid sharp, can do almost everything with it. It's a big knife, right? So very limited use. Why do I have it? Because I like knives. What kind of knives I use? Small fixed blades, folders, and kitchen knives. Okay. But anyhow, so Bark River is good. Small fixed blades by Spyderco are usually good. Falkneven I like, but they tend to make the fixed blades a little bit thicker than I like. If that works for you, that's not a bad option at all. Okay. Yes, it is very, very nice. Extremely well made blades. Ooh, I don't know. I don't have a Leshy 2 yet. Need to talk to Brian about it. I really want one. What scope am I gonna put on it? You know, it is a tough call, but I will probably put a March scope on it. I have a March 3-24 by 52. It focuses very close, has a good range, a magnification range, optically very good, and it's got a nice holdover reticle, so if I want to shoot a little further with the Leshy 2, I can. But it's probably going to be March 3-24 by 52. I talk about this mount a little bit in my video on scope mounts, and it's very good. I've never seen a bad product by Badger. And the modular mount, they did it in a pretty good way. I'm doing some experimentation with where to set up the offset red dot sight. And for the way I use ARs, I think the way Badger does it, I think they're going about it the right way. It's not a cheap mount, but for a modular mount, it's not too bad. But if you find a good deal in it, I would not hesitate. I think it's a very nice setup, nice system. Okay, long range, 1,000 yard. So yeah, Joel, make sure you. Oh, there we go. So Joel did. Where is it? There we go. Okay, yeah. If you mess with the eyepiece and it does not make it better, you should talk to Delta and get them to take a look at the scope. Okay. I have a couple of them, like I've had a couple of them, and I still have one. I did not have any issues at 1,000 yards. I have no clue. I actually sent John an email. That's the John Otland, the guy who owns Oddmount. but I haven't heard back. He was in the Northwest, and now he was hit. The area was hit pretty hard with all the COVID-related restrictions. So I don't know what's happening there. I'll ping him again, and I'll see what he says. Yes, I've tested both the 4-20 and the 5-27 ZCO scopes, ZCO, whatever they are. I like them both. Very high-end, very high-quality scopes. A friend of mine is this sort of sponsored shooter now. Now he's on the team. There's nothing really wrong with them. Against the competition, I like the 4-20x50 more than the 5-27, although both have very good scopes. Nicely designed eyepieces, very good mechanics, good adjustment range. The only kind of knock on them is that on the same magnification, the field of view is a little bit on the narrow side for the very high-end scopes. But aside from that, I mean, Zico and Tangent, I think, are the best right now. In the 5-25 or thereabouts range, I mean, I shoot with a Tangent, and I slightly prefer it to ZCO, and I looked at them side by side, but, you could go either way. It'd be totally fine. It's not a big difference. There are some things about the Tangent I like a little more. I like the turret slightly more. And the depth of field is a little bit better, which I like. But they're both excellent. With the 4-20, there is really less competition for the ZCO. And in that magnification range, I think the 4-20x50 ZCO right now, from what's available right now, is the best of the breed. I think. Yeah, I think that's accurate. So there are other scopes that I like that are coming up, right? So March has some new stuff coming up that looks very promising. If you want high magnification and focal plane, I think March 5-42x56 is probably the one to beat, I think. But if you don't need very high magnification, it's between Tangent and ZCO, with Schmidt being close. And I personally slightly prefer the Tangent with the 56mm scopes, but not a big difference. Excellent. So if you buy a Zico ZCO scope, you have not gone wrong. Excellent designs. Excuse me. When I'm trying to select between all this high-end stuff, is so close that you kind of have to nitpick and look at the specifics. But if you're spending that kind of money, it better be freaking perfect. So look at the reticles, see if you can get your hands on it and get the feel of the turrets. Pick something that works for you. No matter which decision you make, it's probably going to be a good decision. These are all superb scopes. Well, there is no SHOT Show in 2021. They're going to do some digital thing. So the way I try to do this, I try to schedule all my optics stuff for the first 2.5 days, and then I roam around and look at guns and knives and all sorts of other stuff. Last year, I didn't schedule it very well. I didn't spend enough time looking at non-optics things. But whenever we have SHOT Show again, I'm gonna do better. One of the things that happened in 2020, one of my video camera guy was not able to come with me. They had a family problem, so he had to stay home, and that really slowed me down. Next, for 2021, my original plan was to actually bring 3 people with me so that I could be more efficient, but that didn't quite work out since, thanks to COVID, there's no in-person SHOT Show in 2021. In 2022, different ballgame. But look, I talk about optics a lot, partly because I am a legitimate expert in the field of optics, so rifle scopes, right? I'm an optics guy. But outside of that, I'm really a general purpose gun nut and knife nut and a bunch of other things. So SHOT Show is interesting for me for 2 reasons. One, I get to see new stuff. B, I get to see people I don't normally only see once a year, people I've been friendly with for a long time. And 3, I get to roam around and see all the clever gun-related things that people come up with, and that is usually where I find the more interesting stuff. So yeah, I try to look at everything, but I have to get optics out of the way first. Yeah, I scheduled it yesterday, Jared. I don't know. I don't know why you didn't get an alert. I mean, you're subscribed and everything, so you should be. So the 3-27 Schmidt is a very nice scope. But to get the 9-time erector ratio going, there are some compromises. And in terms of pure image quality, actually, on high magnifications, I actually like the 5-25 Schmidt a little bit more, although both are very, very good. In a scope of this type, large, heavy scope, 3 power on the low end doesn't really do that much for me. So it's not a design that's quite as interesting for me. So I like the Zico and the Tangent a little bit more than the 3-27 Schmidt. I have 2 tangents. I have a 5-25 by 56 with the Gen 3 XR reticle, and that's probably my favorite long-range precision scope right now. And I also have a very early 3-15 by 50 with a 30 millimeter tube that sits on my fix right now. That's with a Gen 2 XR reticle, and I like them both quite a lot. They're very, very good scopes. Okay. So unfortunately, not yet. I live in New Mexico, and our esteemed governor, Kim Song-Lujan, or whatever the her name is, this imbecile thinks that New Mexico is North Korea, and she just shut everything down right around the time I got the AK-74. So I actually haven't had a chance to go and shoot it yet. With all AKs, I like a very particular way of mounting a red dot on it and having a magnifier behind it. There are ways to do so. But I'm gonna try this one with a prism and with a conventional scope and with a red dot, and we will see. A lot will come down to how accurate this thing is. But also, as I get older, I like to have either a prismatic scope or a magnifier. I need to mess around a little bit with the setup. But to me, AKs are at their best without magnification most of the time, with the ability to add magnification when you need to, and that's how I like to set them up. Once again, I keep on promising you a video on that, and it's coming, but this freaking COVID thing, everything is getting delayed. Alex, good to see you, sir. Yeah, so in case for those of you who don't know, Affordable Optics and Rifle Reviews, is it? I think that's Alex, regardless. It's a good channel. So the inflection point, meaning the point we get after which you start getting diminishing returns with rifle scopes, is different depending on what type of a scope you're looking at. For hunting scopes, I think it's right around $1,000, and I think scopes like Vortex Razor HD LHT 315 by 42, Leupold VX5 HD, the SIG Whiskey 5, Miopta, Miostar, basically a bunch of scopes around the $1,000 price range for hunting scopes, hunting FFP scopes. I think that's where you get the most for your money. These are really, really nice designs, and more expensive stuff is better, but you start getting diminishing returns. For front focal plane long range rifle scopes, I think this inflection point is a little bit higher. I think it's still in the $1,500 to $1,800 range, because that's basically where you find scopes like Delta Striker, that we talked about earlier, Athlon Ares BTR, not Ares, excuse me, Athlon Kronos BTR, and you can now most of the time find a Vortex Razor Gen 2 in that price range. If you guys are looking for that, call Scott at Liberty Optics, tell him I sent you. You'll get a good deal. It's going to be right in that price range somewhere. Let's see, Nexus Element 5-20 by 50. They're all in this $1,500 to $1,800 price range. These are mostly Japanese scopes. They are increasingly more competent, And it's becoming harder and harder for me to recommend, let's say, $2,500 scope of one of these $1,500 to $1,800 ones. It's not that much of a difference. I make recommendations based on specific questions that people ask. And when I do make this recommendation, I notice that most of the time nowadays, if they want the best bang for the buck and spend some money, it's basically $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. Or they just want the best of the best, and that's Tangent, ZCO, Schmidt, that kind of stuff, right? In between is almost a no man's land, where there are some very competent scopes that are better than the $1,600 stuff, but not that much better. And in terms of what people are looking for, it seems like they want either the best bang for the buck or just the best, right? And that's Tangent, okay? And yeah, the category that is arguably the most interesting right now with long-range front focal plate is right around $1,000, because the high end of the Chinese rifle scopes is kind of right around there. Chinese-made rifle scopes kind of right around there. Stuff like Athlon Ares ETR, some hybrid scopes like Myopt Optica 6, for example, that has a, I assume it has Chinese components assembled in Czech or something along those lines, but some Asian sourced components. They're also getting increasingly good, but I don't think they have been out long enough for us to have enough of an idea of durability and quality to be able to confidently say that this is where your best bang for the buck is, because the track record is a part of it. And the track record of these Japanese scopes in the $1,500 to $1,800 range is a significant factor. Where, in terms of pure performance, oftentimes these top-end Chinese scopes seem like they can compete, but they just haven't been out long enough for me to be able to confidently say, yeah, that's the way to go. But they're clearly coming. Look at how good the Arcan scopes seem to be. We'll see how they hold up, right? Myopt Optica 6, Athlon Ares ETR, the high-end Hawk scopes. There are a few others. It's give it a couple of years. The best bang for the buck might move there, but for now, it's in the $1,500 to $1,800 range. Okay. For those of you who don't know, that's my brother, who is planning to come visit me when I'm done. Guardian Tactical. It sounds so familiar. Give me a moment. I need to pull up a picture to remind me. I'm not as young as I used to be. So I remember they were US-made knives. They had some automatics that were okay, but like I said, it's a automatic knife is not something I care about too much. Oh, there you go. So I remember I've seen these things somewhere. They seem to be okay. They seem to be very well-built knives, but they're too tactical looking for me. They have a bunch of blade shapes that I find mostly not so much useless, but less useful than other ones. So from a standpoint of build quality and stuff, I really liked what I saw from them. But a couple of their models that I've seen were not my cup of thing. There was a Tanto blade there. They were a little bit overbuilt. They were not focusing on the things that are important to me, which is general purpose utility use. And they looked tactical. I don't want a carry knife that looks tactical. They had a very nice automatic, as I recall. It was great. I can't use it, right? My travel doesn't do anything for me. With knives, I really want to fly under the radar as much as I can. With guns, I don't care. It's concealed anyway, and if I have to use it, that's the least of my problems, right? With knives, different ballgame. I want utility. I want it to look like a utility knife, while always in the back of my mind having the alternative application in mind. Okay. For now, yeah. Delta Striker, Athlon Chronos, Tract, Toric, these are all related designs. Pick the reticle that you like the most. For now, I mean, I kind of like the one on the Striker, so Delta Striker, that's what I use most of the time. But all of these are nice scopes. A little bit too early. With all the ammo restrictions, I haven't been able to do much of anything with the 6mm arc. From everything that I've seen so far, for a general purpose AR-15 with long range shooting in mind, I'm leaning towards 6mm arc. If significant portion of that is hunting, stay with the Grendel. I think that's pretty much it. For my purposes, I'm probably going to switch to 6mm arc based on what I've seen so far. Absolutely. Swing by. Yeah, I've played with them. I've played with Protex. They're very nice and they're very good for the money. Good products. But I can't use auto knives. I don't understand fully their legality where I live, and it changes. State laws and city laws are different. It's just not a can of worms I want to open, basically. But they're quite good, yes. All right, I think that was my last question. Unless you guys have something else, I received a couple of, since we talked about optics. Well, look, you're invited, but it's not my problem how long it's going to take you to get here, right? Okay, so I do have a question. Yeah, I have a bunch of Benchmade knives here on Spyderco. So Benchmade is sort of a complicated story. I don't know if you guys remember in the beginning of last year, 2019, Benchmade got themselves into hot water with a bunch of Second Amendment people, and justifiably so. There was some nonsense with the Oregon City Police, the way they are in Oregon, using Benchmade to help them destroy some guns that were confiscated, and gun people went all up in flames about that. That itself does not give me too much of a pause. But then people started digging, and turned out that Benchmade brass, etc., have donated in the last 8 to 9 years almost exclusively to Democrats, and not just to Democrats. There were some that the local ones that they donated to that were, reasonably pro-gun, pro-business, or as pro-gun, pro-business as Democrats get these days, which not very. But they also donated to, for example, a senatorial candidate in New Mexico, where I now live, who is just an anti-Second Amendment asshole. And that did not sit well with Second Amendment people. And I think Benchmade got hit fairly hard with this. The founder of the company made a video, some sort of very half-hearted apology, and all that sort of stuff. So I have very mixed feelings because of that about Benchmade. In grand scheme of things, people can vote whichever way they vote and support whatever candidate they want to support. The part that I find annoying is the stupidity of letting that be public. Okay? They can't be stupid enough to not understand that the bulk of their audience is the same people who vote on the Second Amendment and buy knives. They do exhibit it in a race show and SHOT Show. They support local law enforcement, and I like all of that. All Benchmade knives today are made in the US, I believe. I think they used to have a foreign-made line. They stopped that. They employ about 400 people making knives in the US, and you gotta kind of support it. But the fact that not smart enough to figure out who their audience is, I just find annoying. This kind of an arrogant thing. So I'm mixed on Benchmade. I sold most of my Benchmades. I kept a few that I happen to like. Most of these are no longer made. But I sold most of my Benchmades after that because I think stupidity should not be encouraged. And still have a few that I like, but I'm really mixed. I don't know if I'll buy another Benchmade or not. Partly because I'm vindictive, partly because, like I said, stupidity should not be encouraged. I do like Spyderco a lot. I don't terribly care who the owners of Spyderco vote for, but they are smart enough to not talk about politics. I don't like it when companies get into politics, right? So, and I have no idea who they donate to. Could be donating to Hillary Clinton for all I know. I don't know, and I don't care. And he has to be smart enough to not get into that, right? It's a free country. If you go public with your political beliefs, expect that there will be some sort of repercussions. If Benchmade guys were so arrogant they thought they could get away with it, no. Right? Spyderco makes some knives in the US, some in Taiwan, and some are in China. They're generally all good quality knives. Okay. For example, let's see, Spyderco Paramilitary, US. Native, I think this one was also US, right? Yeah, this is US. This is old Wenger, not made anymore. This was actually US. Huh, most of my Spydercos must be US. The ones that I actually carry, the Spydiechef, this guy is Taiwan. Okay, but I've also used their Chinese-made stuff. They're priced accordingly, and they're generally good knives. Okay. All right. Why is the tangent theta so highly rated? They're really nice scopes. I mean, they're essentially hand-built in Nova Scotia, Canada, by people who have been around the gun and optics world for a long time. The optical system was designed by arguably the best living rifle scope designer, then tweaked by another guy who's really, really good. Their quality control is stupid good. And I think they're doing a lot of things right. And it is easily by the best elevation turret that's ever been put on a rifle scope. The feel is just remarkable. It is expensive. It's a $5,000 scope, close to it. So you have to really want one. Do I need the tangent theta? No. Am I happy I have one? Yeah. Am I ever going to sell it? No. Someday it's going to be pried from my cold dead hands. But the high-end market is competitive. There are other good options. I happen to like this one the most, but it's personal preference. No, not yet. I was planning. So Swarovski colors people hate my ass with a passion. So it's not like I can call them and ask them to send me one to play with. But I was planning to take a look at SHOT Show. Unfortunately, that's not happening. So we'll see. Maybe toward the summer I'll find my way to get my hands on one. Their other spotting scopes are absolutely superb. I expect this one to be stunning, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, look, so there are openly political people like me, but I don't sell stuff, right? And if I did, you kind of know what I am, and I assume that. It's a free country. Like I said, I don't begrudge people their political beliefs. I have plenty of friends and family members who hold very different political opinions than I do, and you know what? It's not that important, right? However, if you're in the business of selling stuff, you should either be just open with this, like guys at Black Rifle Coffee Company, and they're openly right-wing, and that's their audience, and they're okay with it, or just don't talk about this. Do your thing, do your political whatever quietly in the privacy of your own home. Don't get your company involved in this, and I'll be very happy to patronize the product. When a company comes out with an overtly political message that I disagree with, I will stop buying their product, right? Not because it's a bad product, not because it's a bad company, not necessarily. The part that galls me is that they know they will piss me off and they think I will still patronize them. Absolutely not. Okay. 22 long rifle scope. That is affordable. So Nathan, can you define for me what kind of shooting you're gonna do with the 22, and what is affordable to you? The reason I ask is that nowadays a lot of people do this sort of a long range 22, which requires pretty serious scopes. But if it's a simple, Ruger 1022 or a simple bolt gun, and you'll just be doing plinking, that's a different ballgame. So I kind of need to know what you're going to do with it, the distances involved, that kind of stuff. A lot of 22 shooting happens at closer distances, right? So dedicated rimfire scopes usually have parallax set at a closer range. However, if you're going to be going from 25 to 300, and 300-400 is a long way off for a little 22 long rifle, you will need something quite good with repeatable adjustments, good optics, and all sorts of stuff, good parallax adjustment range, and all those sort of things, right? And I have all I can say is that, so I have a few 22s here and there. A couple of them have simple rimfire scopes, like the 227 type basic rimfire scopes from Burris and Vortex, and they work well. But I also have an accurate rimfire. I have a Tikka T1X that usually gets basically the same scopes that my centerfire guns get. If you're looking for precision, a rimfire scope, well, it's not exactly on a budget. The $1,500 Nexus Element is probably one of the best right now. But there you go. So okay. NRL 22 style. So 3-15 SFP. Okay. So generally, if you want to do an NRL 22, you probably need a front focal plane scope. And you probably need a little bit more magnification. But this WFA actually has very nice close focus. The scope that I think fits really well the NRL 22 style in the same basic price range is the Vortex Strike Eagle 5-25 by 56. I have a review on it. It's up on my there's a video on it. So please take a look. Vortex Strike Eagle 5-25 by 56 is a good option. Swamp Fox Warhawk, there are different magnifications, is a good option. Element Titan is a good option. There are a couple other scopes almost out that will probably be good options in the $500-600 range. I'd probably look for those. These are all Chinese-made scopes. Yes, WFA is Japanese, but the quality is getting up there. I would recommend you take a look at one of those. Yeah, BTX is binocular, right? So double single ocular. The way human vision works, if you're using both eyes, there's a lot less fatigue. So for prolonged observation, it makes a pretty big difference, but you will pay for it, right? So that's Swarovski BTX, ATX, all very nice stuff, but really expensive. Okay. There are some companies out there that only encourage positive reviews. And I was doing a review of a Collis and Swarovski is the same company. I was doing a review of the Collis 5-25 by 56. And optically, it was not up to snuff compared to the competition. It was part of my high-end tactical Part 6 review. And The Swarovski colors people, it's the same importer now, they kind of took it personally. I don't give a rat's ass. I review things the way I review things. I'm honest about what I find, and that's why people watch my reviews. And if Swarovski or any other company don't like it, I consider it to be their problem, not mine. Okay. All right. Okay. So Nathan, if you have any further questions, go through my darklordofoptics.com website and ask, or ask in the comments to this video, and I'll see what else I can come up with. But I would start looking right around that Vortex Strike Eagle range. Okay. Okay, where was I? Yeah, it's different for different companies. One of the companies that I have a good relationship with is Vortex, right? I've known them for a long time. At the basis of that good relationship is the fact that they always behaved like adults. I've reviewed a ton of Vortex products over the years, and most of the stuff they make is pretty decent, but I've given them some really, really negative reviews over the years, and they've always taken that as adults do. In other words, not personally. I wish them all well. I hope all these companies do great. Well, almost all. There are a couple that I truly despise, but not the companies, the people there. Swarovski is not one of them. I have nothing against Swarovski. They make very nice stuff. Yes, that's colors. But it's a very competitive market, and if something has a flaw, it is a flaw. All of the large companies, Swarovski, Nightforce, Leupold, Vortex, etc., most of the people they work with will generally give a positive review. Otherwise, they will never get another scope loaner from them and a discounted scope and all that sort of stuff. Vortex, presumably not so much. At least that's not the situation with me. I'm not afraid to piss anybody off, basically. And I've pissed a lot of people off over the years. For example, the two companies in optics world that despise me the most are probably Swarovski and Nightforce, right? Leupold for years would not touch anything I do with a 10-foot pole. Then they had some changes. Now they're quite friendly, and I'm very happy to look at their scopes. I like their new stuff. I don't like their older stuff. I tell it to them exactly the way I tell it to you, and it's take it or leave it, right? Going back, I started doing this membership thing on YouTube, and my Dark Lord of Optics website on locals is also membership based. To a significant degree, this is my attempt to be completely decoupled from affiliate marketing, from advertising revenue, any of this sort of stuff. I like doing this. I like reviewing scopes. I like talking about optics. And my loyalty should be and is only to my audience, right? I could not care less about being useful to anyone else. I only care about delivering the most accurate information to you guys, because that's the only thing that matters. And if a particular company doesn't like me, I don't care. Honestly, there are so many companies out there that I can't look at everything anyway, right? So I look at stuff, give you my best assessment, and move on. And if this company takes it personally and I never look at another one of their products, I'll live. There's a ton of them out there. I go through and look at as much different stuff as I can and formulate my recommendations and make them available. That's basically it. If Vortex got pissed at me tomorrow and I never looked at another Vortex product for the rest of my career, I would still be fully booked with other stuff, right? I don't really care what they think. They don't like it. They don't have to have anything to do with me. They have a business to run. I totally get it. But my loyalty is not to the companies. It is to my audience. Exactly, right? I mean, if all the reviews, if there is a scope that comes out and all the reviews are positive, did you learn anything from that? No. All right, so where was I? I had a couple of interesting optics questions come via email. And one interesting one was it was a comment on a tracked scope review that I wanted to touch on. Somebody noticed that it was a through the scope video that on low magnification there is a serious amount of fisheye that you see, a fisheye distortion that you see in the image. It is extremely common. Most rifle scopes on low magnification have it. And if you pay attention, you will see it. But if you don't, you won't. And the reason why you see it so clearly in a through the scope video is that the camera does not work exactly like your eye does. The way we see things is what is flat to a camera, to your eye, is something that like the inner surface of a sphere, right? So what is a flat image is something that's equal distance from your eye. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe I should do a separate video and sketch this out, right? And if you're looking at something at a very wide angle, what's equal distance from your eye is not a flat plane. It's the curved surface, right? But what the camera is looking for, the camera lens is corrected to look at a flat surface, okay? And a scope is not delivering a flat surface, it's delivering some curvature that your eye natively corrects for, so you don't see it quite as much. You see it if it doesn't, if it's a little bit too much or not quite enough. But to a camera, it's extremely apparent. So when you're looking at a flat image on the screen, taken by a camera that expects a flat image, it will look different than it does to your naked eye looking through a scope. When you're on high magnification, the field of view is very narrow. The curvature of a sphere is very, very close to just a flat plane. But when you are looking at a wide angle, that approximation no longer works. So with virtually all scopes on low magnification, you will see some sort of curvature, some sort of distortion, barrel distortion, or fisheye, or whatever else. And you will see it far more prominently when there is a camera looking through the scope than you would with your naked eye. Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that magazine, Doug. Okay. All right. So let's see, what else do I have? So I had another interesting question that came up. That was somebody on Sniper side. The question was on whether so the guy had a precision scope, don't remember which one, it was a very nice scope. He went and got the eyepiece and everything focused, and then when he was doing some drive practice, something indoors, the reticle was out of focus. In principle, indoors versus outdoors, from a standpoint of eyepiece focus, doesn't matter. What matters, however, is the amount of light. It's usually less bright indoors, so your eye pupil dilates, right? One of the things that happens when your eye pupil dilates is that the depth of field that your eye sees changes. It starts seeing everything is becoming shallower. While outdoors, when your eye pupil is very small, the depth of field is much greater. It's very easy to get your eyepiece focus just slightly off, and during the bright daylight, it doesn't matter. However, it may not be a proper eyepiece focusing setting for indoors use. However, if you verify your settings indoors and make modifications there, when you go back outdoors, it'll work just fine. Okay, so if you set this up if you fine-tuned it indoors, you'll be fine outdoors. If you fine-tuned it outdoors, it may not necessarily be fine indoors. It doesn't have to be outdoors, indoors. It can be just bright light and low light. So for all of my scopes, when I focus reticle, I do the fine-tuning during dusk, kind of when in low light, when my eye pupil has dilated, and that usually gets me the most reliable setting. Okay. Yeah, imagine that. The problem with it's kind of like the aperture in a camera lens, but it's also a little bit different. Because in your camera lens, there are multiple lens elements, and there is a separate aperture somewhere in there that controls this, controls the F number. In your eye, there's one lens with weird curvatures controlled by the muscles in your eye. It's kind of an adaptive single lens. And the concentration of photoreceptors in your retina varies, right, across the plane. The retina itself is also curved. And as you go in low light, you also switch which cells work. So in the end, it's end up being far more complicated thing than just simply adjusting the iris on a photographic lens, right? Okay. The biggest differentiator with this is the human brain, because your brain has to process the image. It makes all sorts of interesting decisions that are completely in the subconscious. So basic, the only kind of basic recommendation I can make, verify your eyepiece focus in low light if you have an opportunity to do so. Okay. All right, guys. Yeah, for what I've seen, they've been very good, but I have not done a thorough test. So I was really impressed with what I saw during shot. It was a while back, I think 2019, I think. But I have not had a chance to really test one since. I keep on thinking of doing a test of binoculars, but every time I try to set one up, the binocular price range that's of more interest to me is in $1,000 range approximately, or maybe even a little bit less. If you're looking at the Blaser like Swarovski, Zeiss HT, etc., if you look at the very high end, they're all going to be good. They're all going to be excellent, right? From everything that I've seen on the high end, Leica Noctivid, I had the 8x42. Leica Noctivid, I think, is the best binocular made today from what I've seen. But it's personal preference. I happen to like the way they do color. Objectively, is it better than Blaser, Swarovski, Zeiss HT? Probably not. And if you get 20 people to look at them side by side very, very carefully, different people will select different one depending on the personal preference. I happen to like the way Noctivid does depth and color, right? And it agrees with my eyes, so that works best for me. Not necessarily going to work best for you. That's how subtle the differences are on the high end. I hope that if I looked at a bunch of binoculars in $1,000 range, there are going to be more differences, talk about more objective differences that may be transferable from person to person, right? So I don't know if I'm ever going to test Blaser binoculars. Maybe if I have a little more time, I'll take a look. But everything I've seen on the high end is very good. That's so up to the sky in daylight is a good first start. It kind of gets you close, but fine-tuning is a little different. And remember, you need more work on an eyepiece if you're doing a front focal plane scope. Second focal plane scopes are a lot easier in this regard. Like I said, I have a couple of videos on this. Take a look. I go over that in some detail. Okay. So my brother decided to argue with me. I'll probably, if he's coming over later, I'll probably have to sketch it out for him. Yes, except when you have a DVO, direct view optic, that's not exactly how this works. Your eye moves, so the size of the spot in the retina does not really depend very much on the size of the iris opening. If it's larger or smaller, you're still on the fovea. But the complete location of the focal plane changes depending on the dilation, and most importantly, your eye does not sit still. It moves around a little bit. So the location of the image spot on your retina changes very slightly. And the slightly out of the fovea regions start providing information for the brain, and you see weird effects when you try to focus on a reticle in low light. Okay. Yes. So experiment with different scopes that you have. Another thing to keep in mind with front focal plane scopes, you also have to check this reticle focus across a bunch of different erector settings.